Hello, I thought I would demonstrate a little bit what the different pieces of gear in the studio actually do on a track. And for that purpose, I'm going to use a track that came into the studio the other day by the Norwegian folk duo Birdi, and a track called Surya Moria. It's a sort of acoustic Norse folk thing, very beautifully recorded. And we'll see what we can do about it. The first thing I do, of course, when I bring something into the studio is I listen to the track to see what's going on. So we'll do that. So as I said, a beautiful mix. The one thing I noticed is that the mix is rather dark, which fits the material really well, but I feel like we could maybe bring the vocal a bit more out front to the speaker by brightening some areas of the mix a little bit. And for that, I think I'm going to use my Elysia Xfilter Mastering Edition. We'll see what we can do with that. So what I ended up doing was I used a high shelf to boost a little bit from about 4 kilohertz and out, but then in addition, because it's a nice way to avoid any kind of harshness, the Xfilter Mastering Edition has a function they called passive massage, which is basically an LC filter that has a resonant peak, I think around 12 kilohertz, and then it slopes off around 17 kilohertz. Which gives a very pleasant kind of smooth harmonic distortion at the top. I also used the high mids to boost a little bit, so just to bring out a little bit of the upper body of the voice. And I'll play a little bit and I'll engage and disengage the EQ, and you can see what it does.
Kommer mal
I'm probably boosting a little more now than I will for the final master, because just to be able to demonstrate more clearly what the gear does, I'll probably dial things back about 10% or something. So that's what I would do at the high-end spectrum of things. I also wanted to show a little bit what you can do in the low end with the Elysia. So now I removed the processing I did on the high end, and we're going to focus on the low end. And I started by pulling out a little bit of energy in the 300 hertz area. It was a little bit, not exactly muddy, but you could bring out a bit more clarity. That way I engaged the low, mid, narrow Q so that I could be a bit more precise with my notch. Then I engaged the low cut filter and set it, I think, to around 40 hertz and boosted by a couple of dB. The interesting thing about the low cut function on the Elysia Xfilter is that it introduces a resonant peak around 100 hertz, and that gives you really tight low end, so you can cut a bit of the very bottom that you don't really need, and then at the same time it tightens things up where you sort of need it. So I'll engage and disengage a little bit, and you can hear the difference. And again, I've removed now the high-end processing. It's a very subtle difference, and maybe you need headphones or really good monitors to hear it, but subjectively it tightens up the low end a little bit, so removes a little bit of flab and unnecessary energy. So next I've engaged the API 2500 bus compressor, which is in my ears a very ideal glue compressor, and I'm just setting it to sort of massage the outer edges of the track. So I've set the threshold so that it really just touches the peaks. You can see the lights goes on here. Attack is about 3 milliseconds, a ratio of 3:1. I've set it to a variable release. Soft knee. The 2500 has a function called thrust, which is basically a sidechain filter that you can use to filter out the low frequencies so they don't trigger the compression. But for this track, I feel like so much of the track actually resides in the low frequencies that I want a sort of holistic compression that affects all of it. So that's what I'm using. You can also choose between a new or old compression type, basically a feed forward or feedback compressor. And well, for this track, I like the new one. It brings a little bit of energy to the transients. You can choose the degree of link between the left and right channel. Set it to about 70%, I think. And that's about it. We can switch it in and out and see what it does. Now it's disengaged. Now it's engaged. So it's very subtle, just sort of loose it together. Next in the chain is the SPL Vitalizer. I feel like I've done so much now with the Xfilter EQ that most of these functions I don't really need. The one thing that I might want to use is the stereo expander, which is very beautiful. On the SPL, it's very musical and doesn't really introduce too many artifacts. You have to be careful not to use it too much, but Here I have it set to about, what is it, 7, 8 or something, and I can engage it and disengage it, and you can see what it does. So it's disengaged. Engaged. Disengaged. It's yet another very subtle thing, but you know, that's what mastering is. You do everything in very subtle increments, and it adds up to something. If you do too much at each stage, each incremental stage, then you end up overcooking the track, and that's no good. You want to be subtle. You want to be true to the original vision, to the original mix, especially when it's as nice as this one. The very last stage before I go back into the digital domain is that I use the Dictator from Gainlab Audio. It's a really great compressor. It's again something that I use just to tickle the outer edges of the music, but it, you know, has tubes. It gives it just a really nice sort of finished sound. You can see what the gain reduction does on the meters. It's very, very subtle. I'll engage and disengage, and you can hear. It's disengaged. Engaged. You can see the meters barely moving, but even at unity gain, it has a sound that I really like. So that's that. Now I'm gonna disengage all the processing, and you can hear, you know, how far we've come. Everything disengaged. Everything engaged. There's a slight bump in volume, but you can still hear what it actually does. Disengaged. Engaged. So like I said in the beginning, I'll probably dial some of this processing back a bit. I've overdone it a little bit now just so that you can hear what's actually happening. But this is the basic process that I would go through in the analog domain, and then once I bring it into the digital domain, I might do some more surgical, precise things, and finally run it through a digital limiter just to make sure that nothing peaks over the limits. And then that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks.